And we are live. Okay, let me fix my hair and do what I need to do to share this out. Just a second. This is the pre-show. We've got about 7 minutes to get this all ready to go. Ta-da. Here we go. There it is. It's interesting how easy this can be sometimes. Copy the link. Go over to Facebook. Paste that in. Nope, that didn't quite work. Oh, there's 3 people already. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Give me just a minute. It's not quite the bottom of the hour. Bingo, there we go. Okay, there we go. Reka, oh, you got the book in the rock. I'm glad you did. I'm sorry it wasn't the best rock possible because I'm running low because my grinder stopped, but I'm glad you got the book. Okay, I'm going to send this out. Hold on. Send the live notice. The going alone live pre-show is up and running, hyphenated, up, and I think it is running at the link below. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and bring your nihilism. No, I'm not going to do that. Yes, I am. Your nihilism. Except I can't spell it. And bring your grab a cup and bring your nihilism to the cold table of breakfast. No, what should I say? Grab a cup of coffee and bring your warm buttered nihilism to join me. How about that? Grab yourself a cup of coffee and bring your warm buttered nihilism to sit and chat for a bit. You have your coffee, Reka? Good. I didn't get mine. The Starbucks inside was just too busy, and I decided to sit outside because the weather is nice. It's foggy, but it's nice. The Going Alone Live pre-show is up and running at the link below. Grab yourself a cup of coffee and bring your warm buttered nihilism for a chat. And how about that? For a chat and listen. There you go. Yeah, that's good. And then I'll put the hashtag warm buttered nihilism. There we go. That's sending that out. Now let me do the same with the other thing, which is here. Share. Don't want to share that on LinkedIn. Too many of my coworkers are discovering this stuff, which is. I was leaving work. I was at work yesterday or Friday, and I was hanging out at my cube, and a coworker walked past down the hallway, and shouted out something about seeing me on YouTube. And I was like, ah, crap. That's all I need is for everybody to see this stuff on YouTube. No, but what the heck? It's not that. Actually, what they were referring to wasn't in particular. I think what she was referring to wasn't this endeavor in this channel, which some people know about. I think what they were referring to more was the new channel that I set up, Pop Out the Chat. I did set up a channel to, oh good, now I can see the chat right here. I set up a separate channel for quite a different endeavor. I uploaded a couple of videos here. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Yeah, Reka, I know I can't do it. But I did set up this other channel for this other endeavor that I'm doing called SharePoint Project. Well, it's basically a project management channel. I don't know, how boring could that possibly be? Why don't I just start up a YouTube channel on risk management? But it's actually a very serious endeavor that I'm doing within the organization, trying to create a project management group, maybe a project management methodology and process and it's actually branded. It's called the Q2 PMs. Q2 has a particular meaning that one of the team members helped together. We kind of fleshed that out. So anyway, that's maybe she was referring to that, because that I've begun spreading that URL around the office a little bit. Let's see, is there anything else, anywhere else I need to share this? Just a second. I shared it on Facebook. Oh, I need to share it over on the other YouTube channel. Not the YouTube channel. On the Facebook page. I still have 1 minute. I need to share this on the Facebook page, Going Alone, of all places. Can't forget about that page. There we go. I need to grab the URL. Copy. I like it out here. This is much better. There we go. And share now. Those guys are the valet. I live just across the street. I live in that building. You can see just through the trees there. Can't barely, it's right over there. So I literally just come downstairs and walk across the street to come here. Okay, I think we're at 6:30. We are ready to begin. As I do with my driving school students, I do a little action thing. Okay, let me bring up the chat thingy. We're ready to go. So, and action. Welcome everybody to a book reading for, good morning Rika, of Going Alone, my book about discovering a universe, of getting down and depressed when you discover that the universe may not have any apparent meaning, and what the heck to do about that, or at least what I've done about it. So I'm the guy that wrote this, Kurt Bell. It's a life, I don't know if that's coming up backwards, a life of courage, joy, and independence. This is be safe, but not too safe, which is exact words that I use to end the book. So I put it at the beginning and the end in this little sticker right here. I had no idea when I did that the kind of marbled sticker background I took would match so well the cover. I was really pleased about that. It was a happy happenstance. Anyway, I read every month. I come to this place, usually here, the Marriott Hotel in Irvine. There's 2 Marriotts. There's a Courtyard Marriott just next door. I don't go there. I come here to the Marriott proper. Or sometimes I go to the beach. And I read from the chapter. Now this is not a reading like the book readings that I'm doing out in the desert, where I literally try to sit and read from a whole chapter without any commentary. This is a reading where I actually stop and interject along the way. I call this an annotated reading. And my goal is not to complete the chapter, just to read as far along into it as I can. It's pretty rare. I think the only time I ever actually finished a chapter was with the Siberia Bridge. I think I read that whole thing. Anyway, I get off track. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to read, stop. This is a live interactive interface. I can see your chats that come up here. If you have a question or comment, let me know. We'll do this. I'll go probably a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. We'll see. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. I'm going to start from the very beginning. Today we're going to actually recycle back and start from the very beginning. First chapter, annotated reading. I'm going to start from the front cover. Going Alone, a life of courage, joy, and independence. Kurt Bell. Be safe, but not too safe. Deja vu all over again. Now I must confess that I was a little bit, oops, gotta go. Have a nice day, Kurt. Already finished your book. It was amazing and inspiring. Oh, Reka, thank you. And thank you for reading. Please let me know if you have any questions. I was a little bit, uncertain about this title because it really tells you nothing. But the landscape there gives you an impression that, what is this thing that I'm looking at? Especially the life of courage, joy, and independence. So presumptuous. But it really is. It does take courage to face down the emptiness of the universe. And it is possible to recover from that, a life of joy and independence. Now, on here it says, Going Alone, discovering a universe without apparent meaning. That's actually not the operating title. It's not the title. I changed it. The real title, the subtitle down here, it should read, I'm reading off the website. By the way, there's a website that goes with this book, goingalone.org. That's all it is, goingalone.org. Come see me. And it's a website. Oh, hello, Essex. Good morning. The real proper subtitle is Creating a Life of Purpose in a Universe Without Apparent Meaning. that was better than this. This, discovering a universe without apparent meaning sounded such a downer. And this was what it was for 2 years. I didn't like it. I wanted to, because the book is 2 parts. The first part is the discovery of the universe without apparent meaning. The second part is the decision, is the action to do something about that, to make a life of meaning. So now, creating a life of purpose in a universe without apparent meaning captures the 2 sides of that coin. For David Bixler, who showed us the wild. He was a professor in junior college who took us to the wild, and he didn't show us the wild itself, but he showed me the front door. Here's the warning at the beginning. There's 2 warnings. Warning, do not go alone to the wild unless you are willing to accept the very real risk of suffering and dying alone. Take some precaution to let others know where you will be and when you will depart and return. Bring something to save your life, such as a first aid kit and a satellite GPS phone or emergency beacon. Again, don't go alone unless you are willing to accept the very real risk of suffering and dying alone, and are willing to accept responsibility for bringing pain to those who care and love about you, or who love and care about you. This is the disclaimer that's at the front of every video now that I make, the Going Alone series. So that first black screen comes up, has that little bit on it, that's it. That really is a serious caution. I think that anybody that tries to recreate or take the footsteps that I took, especially if you try to do it exactly, you're in very real risk of being hurt or dying. Next second bit here. Also, this is not a book of answers. Yes, kind of it is. Read on only if you are prepared to continue life with less and are ready to die expecting nothing more. If so, then welcome to the result of my own great life adventure in italics. Well, what I mean by it's not a book of answers is that I can't answer the problem of nihilism. Nihilism being the discovery or the apprehension that the universe has no meaning. A lot of people think that brings on the baggage of corresponding despair. So I don't have an answer to that. I can't tell you that the universe has meaning, other than the meaning of reproducing ourselves and getting our genes into the next generation and all that comes with that. That's quite a meaningful thing. It appears to be the only mandate that we really have. Live as long as we can and raise our children to a viable age. But I do think that there's answers in this book, insofar as that I did include a chapter called The Good Life, where I have 7 objectives and 21 principles that I think, if lived by, can produce a very satisfying life, a life of joy and independence. But it takes some courage. Next page. A little quote from Hawthorne. No, this is a quote from Yeats. Be you still, trembling heart. Remember the wisdom out of the old days. Him who trembles before the flame and the flood, and the winds that blow through the starry ways. Let the starry winds and the flame and the flood cover over and hide, for he has no part with the lonely, majestical multitude. Wow, that just captured so well the essence, the sense that I have of those who couldn't imagine why anyone would go to such as the places that I go, let alone alone. Yet those who would go, and not just go, but go again. Sections of the book. There are 15 sections. Introduction, The Cast, Siberia Bridge, My Muse is a Corpse. Struggled with that chapter name, but I'm so glad I did it now. The Anxiety Hike, The Path of Wildness, Going Alone, The Stoic Life, The Good Life, My God is a Little God, Final Thoughts, Epilogue, Ecclesiastes 9, Recommended Reading, and Appendix. That's the entirety of Going Alone. What is it, about 280 so odd pages. Let's go. Introduction. Introduction. How the journey began. Greetings from a man in the past with a sincere interest in your future. Oh, I learned from that last reading I did under the bridge last week out in Siberia to pause. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Goodness gracious, sorry. I learned to pause between the breaks in the chapter. I put a space between each chapter. Now, I don't know if that's very conventional to do, but I did that. And I wasn't using it when I was reading under the bridge. I was just plowing through, and a lot of it was due to the fatigue and the heat and all. I was just trying to get through with it. It was the middle of the night. I was scared. I was under a bridge. Yes, this is my book, XIA. I don't know how to pronounce that name. This is it, going along. I'm just reading the first chapter, introduction. I'll start again, because it was just the one sentence. Introduction, how the journey began. Greetings from a man in the past, with a sincere interest in your future. My name is Kurt Bell. I'm 53 years old as I write these words, which is important and relevant, as I do not think I could have written them at any other age. This book could not have been produced in my 40s, or in any decade prior, or to follow. This is a story to be told from my 50s, and my one chance at describing the landscape and perspective of my life as seen from this particular vantage in time. This is my season of philosophy, which is my way of describing a period of life for recording ideas and stories which are reflective and cumulative of the best lessons so far lived and discovered. This book is an effort at sharing my experience and advice with those to come, and who might be inclined to sit and read a bit from an aging man who will be gone from life much sooner than he'd like. For, despite my various trials and challenges, I do dearly love being alive, and it saddens me to know I'll soon die and pass away forever to nothing. Saying this isn't a forecast or prognosis of imminent death, but instead is simply a sober reminder of the reality that life so often ends when we least expect, and sometimes when we're at last ready to live. I won't hide the fact that I wrote this particular paragraph with my descendant in mind. I'm picturing a grandson or granddaughter, 2, 3, 5 generations down, if I'm lucky, if the book can stay in the hands of my family that long, who might wake up into this world a little bit like me. And I remember being a preteen, gazing out through the window of the school bus out at the openness beyond, because I lived out in the countryside, and wondering at what I would discover out there, and wondering about the meaning of life, and having hints that maybe there is no meaning, and maybe all this stuff these people are telling me about these contrived ideas of meaning, of salvation and purpose and oversight and eternal love and eternal life, maybe these are just comforting stories to get us by through the night, and to push away the fear that we have of the death that seems so evident and that was becoming apparent to me at a young age. Maybe this book will find its way into the hands of a great-great-grandson or daughter who has those same questions, and we'll read that paragraph and we'll understand that this is a message from someone in their past who, I felt the same way. And this is the consequence and the result of the bulk of my life pursuing that. That's what's in the book. Next paragraph. Pardon me. I wrote this book with the young in mind, particularly the young who are just now waking into adulthood with questions about the life they found themselves living and the future which yawns ahead like a strange road to uncertainty. I was in this same position once, from about age 15 to 45, which was a long time of seemingly aimless drift. I'd like to help you shorten this period and make better use of the precious days I believe we each only get once. It took me a long time to break free of life's drift and settle into what I call a life of courage, joy, and independence. There's no gimmick here. I have no ulterior motive. I don't believe in an immortal soul, and therefore have no interest in saving mine or yours. However, I do sincerely want to be helpful, and I'd like to help you enjoy a better life and begin living this life sooner. I won't ask you to believe anything I say, though I will explain the reasoning behind the arguments I propose. Let me start by sharing a little of my own background and some of the events which contributed to the challenges I faced and have mostly overcome. I arrived at young adulthood on my own. At age 15, my family was in the process of breaking up, and I was operating as an adolescent without much adult guidance or oversight. I was lucky, though, that a high school teacher at the time introduced me to a book titled Walden by the author Henry David Thoreau. This happened after our English class had been assigned to read The Call of the Wild by Jack London, and I had expressed to the teacher how much I'd enjoyed the story, especially the narrative description of wilderness and the experience of life in the wild for both man and beast. I remember this same teacher taking time from her duties to walk me to the school library to locate and offer me a copy of Walden, which proved a pivotal event in my life, as the book opened my eyes to a way of living and thinking which closely aligned to some inner interests I'd barely become aware were developing within me. Walden helped me to find the courage to venture out and alone onto my own road, to follow the beat of my own drummer, as Thoreau would describe, and to allow myself to live life in better accord with my own inclination and native aptitudes. It was the going alone bit which moved me most, as this provided an example and courage to strike out without companionship, aid, or comfort, and to take risks I might not have otherwise taken. I took Thoreau's example to heart and began my own solo meanderings and living in emulation of a lifestyle I thought well suited to who I was and the man I wanted to become. So, as my family began to break up, and my parents had their attention elsewhere, and my brother and I were pretty much left on our own to attend to our own living and our own upbringing, I kind of dug into that sense that I had, that something beyond the window of the school bus, and what could that be, and how can I muster the courage to do it? What is out there? And then it was fortuitous that that teacher practically by the hand, not really, but led me to the library and gave me that copy of Walden to read, which I could not read. It was indecipherable to me at first. The language in it was so poetic and flowery. I can see if I can pull a little bit off from memory. The mass of men lead lives. This is Thoreau. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate country, we go to the desperate city and have to console ourselves with the bravery of minks and muskrats. I got that backwards, the city and the country part. But it was very flowery, sentences the length of paragraphs the length of a chapter. And I loved it. There was something in vocabulary that I couldn't understand. I had to get a dictionary and have a dictionary with me, and Walden on the other hand, and that's one thing that helped me to learn a lot of words. But anyway, the point was, I saw in Thoreau the example of a man who had not only dropped down the window of the school bus, had climbed out and was meandering around out there to find out what was out there. Kind of like the cover of this book, right? Now that kind of represents that. And I found his example one that pushed me to do the same in my own way. Next chapter. My first attempts at Thoreau's lifestyle were a few solo hikes into the mountains surrounding our humble ranch near Lake Hughes, California. My family lived then in a very rural location, on 10 acres of land a few miles up Pine Canyon Road from the community of Lake Hughes, 60 miles north of Los Angeles. Our home was surrounded by chaparral wilderness, and going alone required very few footsteps from our front door. I spent much time then walking alone in the wild, escaping perhaps from the confusion of my teens, looking for something, not yet ready to discover what wasn't there in the wild to meet me. Now the interesting thing is that not only did I begin that quest to begin going alone in the wild, I began also other quests. I decided I wanted to learn more about other things. And that was when I discovered Christianity and began to pursue that, and actually did become a Christian. Although that didn't last long, because it was an interesting thing to jump in to the Christian fold, to find that I was nice and warm. Jumping into the Christian fold, in a way, was a matter of, for me, of turning away from the window of the bus, turning back and to the warm comfort of the team and the group and the companionship and the like, and say, come join us, sit with us, Kurt, have fellowship with us. All you need to do is believe. I thought at first, well, that sounds okay, I'll believe. And I gave my life to Christ. And I did it sincerely, and I did feel that rapture that comes out, that feeling. I remember that joy that was there. But unfortunately, that boy that was still gazing out the window couldn't stop his questionings. And I began asking my fellow believers for the reason for the joy in their heart, to quote 1 Peter 3:15, which was something I had. It was, why do you feel this? Why do you believe this? Tell me your reason. Give me your good reasons to believe. And nobody could. And I realized that the reasons that they were giving me were weak, contrived, at best, propositions that at best they were weak because they were. Let me see if I can back up my own thing. They were weak because they weak and they contrived, all for the same reason, because in the end they required faith. That was the same thing. It always boiled down to faith. And it didn't take long for me to realize that faith was a panacea, an answer. Faith would give you the answer to any riddle you wanted to know the answer to. You could believe anything on faith. And once I realized that at the core of all of these beliefs was faith, I knew that something was up. That it was again, to use that word, it was contrived. That there was a game going on here. That we were simply turning our backs from the window to the warm companion and glow of comfort, of fellowship, to make that thing outside the window go away. So I turned away, and I was no longer a Christian, and I went back to gazing out the window. Actually, I wound up opening the window up. The remains of our home at Lake Hughes are still there, burned out after the fire which destroyed everything in 1983. The foundation and remaining bits of our lives at Moonshadow Ranch are located on the north side of the road, down in the river wash, just a quarter mile downstream from the remains of an abandoned highway rest area. Though our home site can be easily missed, the roadside rest is still evident by a dirt turnout and parking area on the north side of the road, amidst a cluster of tall pines. And that ruin is still out there. I go out there maybe once a year and poke around in the ruins of our old life. Every family should have some ruins. Our family bought Moonshadow, which included a simple one-bedroom home, for $15,000 in 1976. We bought it at the tail end of a family journey we called the Odyssey, when our traveling home was a converted Frito-Lay potato chip delivery truck, and we wandered the United States and Canada, searching for our collective selves. It would be a mistake to overlook the influence the Odyssey had on my life, which in many ways played as important a role in setting precedent for the importance of adventure as Thoreau's model of independence and self-reliance at Walden. Now, before the family began to fall apart, the family did take this thing called the Odyssey, where we literally sold everything. Dad quit his job, we sold our house, and we wandered around like hippies for a summer. That's how we wound up in Lake Hughes. That experience also had an influence on me. It was another example in courage to for lack of a better term, to dismantle or destroy one's current life in favor of living a new life, which it's no coincidence that I and my wife have done many times in our decades together. After the Odyssey, and after I gained the relative independence of a driver's license and a car, I began venturing further out on my own, even transforming my first car, a 1970 Camaro Rally Sport, into a miniature motorhome. Excuse me. I did this by removing all but the driver's seat and fashioning a bed, dresser, and storage cabinet into the places where the removed seats had been. When I was done, I created a little muscle car motorhome, which was quite comfortable for my solo adventures, though honestly, I only used it a few times for this purpose. In fact, I found hitchhiking to be a more interesting and inexpensive way of getting around. and I was lucky to enjoy a short hitchhiking career before America lost its willingness to pick up strangers by the side of the road. This paragraph describes the two incidents that really kick-started the real adventuring in earnest, and that was the taking of my first car, that Camaro, making it into a little motorhome and pretending like I would use it, which I never really did, maybe once or twice. Mostly it was just the exercise of creating the motorhome, so to speak. The real endeavor started when I decided to hitchhike, and I bought a backpack and got my thumb out and hit the road, and spent 3 summers in a row hitchhiking all around North America. It was quite an adventure. I mean, I really did jump into the deep end then. That was a deep end. I began hitchhiking during the last 2 years of high school, initially just in California, though gradually I made my way halfway across the USA and up nearly into Canada. I enjoyed 3 or 4 very long solo hitchhiking adventures during this time, when I literally went with the wind and slept out in the open, with very little money, resources, or access to communication. These experiences, many odysseys really, had a great influence in dulling my apprehension about going alone. Today, I can thank those hitchhiking trips for development of the nerve and gumption I'd later need to simply walk away from the sane and secure, to venture alone into wild places without a map, a friend, or any certitude regarding finding my way back. This early life path I was on, of ever-extending adventure, of going further and deeper into strange places, always alone and seemingly without a safety net, would likely have led me to disaster and perhaps an early death, or a solitary life of social irrelevance, if it hadn't been for the institution of Chaffee Community College in Altaloma, California, and a professor named David Bixler, as well as the small band of college friends with whom I shared a few years between high school and university. David Bixler introduced me to biology, as well as the more academic side of Thoreau, and the perspective of natural history, and the methods and processes of science, and gave me and many others our first experiences of true wilderness. David Bixler awoke the grown-up empiricist in me and sent me forward on a life of reasoned discovery, with an eye and an interest in the frontiers of what we know, and why we should care about what is true and not just what is comforting, traditional, sanctioned, or popular. Another important event at this time was discovering the public broadcasting TV series Cosmos, written and hosted by Carl Sagan. This program and its companion book won me over to the full paradigm of science and ignited a flame of interest in the natural world, which burns as strong today as when I felt my first shudder of awe at the recognition of deep time and the processes by which our species has come to know ourselves and our small place in the universe. The path I chose as a young man was risky, as going alone is a hazard at any age. Go too far, and you might not get back. And even if you return, some essential part may be left behind in the place you found. A place in mind, a place alone, a place you may never successfully relate to others who've never been so far afield without the comfort and guidance of maps, compass, companions, or gods. Going alone is key, and the people who visit deep solitude may appear eccentric or even mad to those who've never been, describing realities which don't seem very real, which may, in fact, only be real in the world they alone know. I sensed early this risk in going alone, and took measures to protect myself from going too far or too long. The most significant decision was my choice to settle and marry a young woman whom I love, respect, and admire, and who represents and lives a life very different from anything I'd known. Likewise was I to her, and together we formed a symbiotic union of stability and adventure, which has served us well for over 30 years. I really did recognize early on that I was on a dangerous route, that even if I survived my hitchhiking trips, and there were some points that I may not have survived it, something was going to come loose in here, or not loose so much as, or that was possible too. Something was going to change that I would come back and I would be describing a reality that wouldn't relate to anybody else, that would probably be accurate and correct for me. I'd seen such people, I'd seen such middle-aged adults, or 30-somethings that had somehow gone so deep, so far, they came back and they just didn't quite fit in there, like a piece of the puzzle that you couldn't get in anymore. Not that that piece wasn't right, not that it wasn't a real thing, it just didn't fit anymore. And I knew that was a danger, and I was worried about that. And I didn't marry my wife as a preventative for that, but I did recognize, I did a lot of dating in college, and when I met Yumiko, I realized that this is the one. This is the person who shares the adventure thing by virtue of the fact of what she had done in coming to America to augment her life, her very sane and sober life in Japan with a great life adventure. The fact of how she had done that and the opposition she had faced in doing that and making this real told me, hey, this is one of me. She's like me. But at the same time, her ability to maintain that foundation, and especially the connection that our marriage had to the deep culture and rich foundation of Japanese culture, I sensed that would be a tether in a way. And a good tether with a person that I really enjoyed spending time with, that I really respect and that I love, and that I continue to hold in great esteem to this day. So that's kind of how I wound up starting the adventure and holding on to the tether of this by virtue of a decision to wear one of these and to respect one of these and to abide and follow one of these for the rest of my life. Well, there's a couple of comments. Mike says, hi Kurt, just got off work here in Japan, love your book. I'm living in Hino City in Tokyo Metropolitan now. Love it here. All right, cool, nice to talk to you, Mike. Welcome, just got off work. Darren says, hi Kurt, hi Darren. And that's a neat name. Activitate says, hi Kurt, been following you for years. I watched you back in the early 2010s and watched Emily grow up. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. You're very welcome, and thank you. Okay, I'll continue. Next chapter, next paragraph. Over time, I finished high school, went to college, got married, pursued a career, paid my taxes, and raised a family. I've managed to fulfill most of the expected roles and responsibilities of a social man of my time. On the other hand, I've also lived another quite different life, a life in pursuit of the noble goals suggested by Thoreau, the example of the Odyssey, and the fond remembrance of the solitary adventures of my teenage years. Through this other life, I discovered and developed a separate side of myself, became the man whom Thoreau suggested I might be, and lived a life which has been a source of much satisfying personal fulfillment. So this is quite true, and unfortunately the way I present this other side of myself on YouTube and social media gives a lot of people, based on the feedback I get, the appearance that that's all I have. That my whole life, I just got a comment this week from 2 different people saying, wait a minute, because I posted that video about my job. Wait a minute, I thought all you did was spend time wandering around out in the desert having adventures. I've been getting that comment for over a decade, as long as I've been on YouTube. No, actually, I've compartmentalized these things. The big adventures happened early in life. The big solo adventures happened in my teens and early 20s. The big life adventures happened in companionship with my wife, in partnership with her, by virtue of the 4 separate times that we have utterly destroyed our lives. I mean, torn it apart as a couple and put our lives, what we wanted to keep in suitcases, and went over to Japan and then back to America and then over to Japan and back to America. It's been a ping pong trip back and forth, taking life apart, moving across the ocean, recreating a new life, staying there for, 5 years, 7 years, something. Take that apart, come back, start with a new life. We've done that 4 times now. Those are great life adventures that Yumiko and I have shared together. Intermixed with that, all along the way, is a routine that I have, that every 2 weeks I go on a mini adventure. And that now happens every Thursday night and Friday every 2nd week. Unfortunately, because people think that's all I ever do, because when I'm out there doing that, I make 5 or 10 videos and I upload them between adventures, and it looks like that's all I'm ever doing. But no, I've got a job, I've got a family, I've got a life other than that. I don't think my life would be as full, rich, or fulfilling without those things. I wrote this book in appreciation of Thoreau's Walden and other similar books which have influenced me over the years, and which I've identified at the end of the book in my recommended reading section. I hope my book may prove helpful, particularly to the young, to someone like myself, who finds themselves suddenly awake and conscious in a universe of wonder, and not sure just how to proceed or how to best spend their time. I won't tell anybody exactly what to do, though I will share objectives and principles which I have found helpful. Nor can I offer companionship, as the path I recommend isn't wide enough for two, and must always be found and followed alone. Yeah, that's very true. That's why I go alone every 2 weeks. I do things with my family on alternate days, like today is movie and lunch day with my wife. But the other stuff has to be done alone. Otherwise, if you don't go alone, how are you going to see the great indifference? You know, it's like that back to the bus thing, right? I mean, you have to spot that outside the window and say, well, it's time to go see it. Pull the window up or down or whatever so you can get out and climb out and go. If you grab someone and haul them out the window with you, then you've taken that fraternity along, and all it's going to be is a nice hike. And hikes are nice, but explorations, adventures, great life adventures can yield a lot more. Now a note about how this book was written, the characters within, and the formatting approach. I wrote Going Alone between 2013 and 2017, between the tail end of my family's life in Japan and the start of our new life in the USA. The book was compiled from various online journals, which in turn were composed in bits and pieces via tweet-sized sentences and paragraphs, blurbs, which I pecked out on my mobile phone. I wrote nearly everything while on the move and adventuring, usually while walking and hiking, often far beyond the edge of internet connectivity. Each upload was hashtagged with a theme, which in turn became the major sections of this book. Remember I read the chapters earlier? Here are the themes. There are 6 of them. Hashtag, my muse is a corpse. Hashtag, the path of wildness. Hashtag, going alone. Hashtag, the good life. Hashtag, the stoic life. And hashtag, my God is a little God. Those were the core chapters of the book, which were pecked out on my phone on the adventuring, brought together to form the nucleus of the chapters, and then added prose around the chapters to those chapters to explain them, and then added the supplemental chapters that became the, how many are there? Did I say 15 total chapters and sections? I think I saw a comment. I'm sorry I can't pronounce your first name, Xia. Is that Chinese? I think it is, right? Z? I don't know, I'm sorry. I enjoy listening, but I have to go now. I got something to do. Thank you for sharing your book with us. You're very welcome. And have a great day, okay? Next chapter, paragraph. The blurbs are rarely related, though sometimes there is a small story being told in the process of updates, which may become clear if the blurbs are read in their original order of upload. It's possible to find the original blurbs in their original order, along with any associated photos, as well as date and timestamps, by referencing my various Facebook pages. In particular, my Facebook page, Softypapa, which is the place where nearly all of my extemporaneous writing did first appear. The blurbs are included in this book in italics and collected together in sections under the heading, Notes from my Muse. So I put the blurbs together, so there's this prose type of writing that I'm reading right now, but if you go forward far enough, you'll start to see that it turns into this. It's hard to see the difference, but these are blurbs. They're italics, and they're separated by the little tilde mark, and these are the notes from the Muse. These are pretty big ones. Whoops, that page has more, characteristic. This is the stuff that I wrote on the adventures. The section of the book titled The Path of Wildness was developed while my family and I were living and raising our daughter in Japan, in the small village of Yada, where my wife grew up. The Path of Wildness was my first try as a larger book. However, the story was not complete then, the ideas not fully considered or fleshed out. and it took returning to America and my time alone in the desert to complete the tale. This section titled Anxiety Hike is from a blog post and video of the same name, and was added to provide a guide to anyone who might want to experience for themselves the landscape and inspiration for so much of this book's content. If you decide to try this hike, just remember to go alone for best results, though keep in mind that the landscape here will kill you and is incapable of shedding a tear. So those two chapters, the Path of Wildness, that's the chapter that was the beginning, the very start of the book. I wrote that in Japan to share with the young people that were writing to me and saying, well, how much fun adventures you're having, Kurt. How can I do that too? I've got all these things in the way. How can I do it? So I wrote that chapter, and that was the start. And then the anxiety hike is literally a blow-by-blow, step-by-step, turn-by-turn explanation of how to get to a place called the Black Mountain out in the desert, the starting point of Siberia, and how to get back. And as the chapter proceeds, it becomes increasingly less clear about where you're going, because my ambition kind of is to help you get lost along the way. That's why I had the disclaimer at the beginning, don't go unless you're willing to get lost and willing to take the risk of being hurt and perhaps dying. Not that I want to kill you. Not that I want to kill anybody or hurt anybody. But that is the way. That risk is necessary. That distance, that separation, that sense of having our feet not quite sure if this is the right next step, is in the direction of wilderness, wildness, is the way to go to see the great indifference, or at least to apprehend it's there. My book includes some characters, such as the Muse, the ghosts of Siberia, the soulless beasts, the desert killer, and my little god, deliberately lowercase. These characters are, of course, fictional, and were created as foils to my own reflection on the character of humanity's encounter with something I call the great indifference, which is defined and described in the sections titled The Cast and Going Alone. So there's characters in the book. I mostly made everything up. Place names are nearly all made up. Black Mountain, the Deepwater Wilderness, and Volcano Wilderness, as well as places like the Sandman's Bed, Mount Wildness, the Woodsman's Cabin, the Edge of Deep Water, and the Home of Faith, are my own names for places without a name, or which I renamed for my own purpose. Siberia, Baghdad, Black Ridge, and Campo No. 1 are real places, some of which are described well in Joe de Cahoe's excellent book, The Silence in the Sun, which shares the history of settlement along the stretch of railroad and Route 66 between Barstow and Needles in the eastern Mojave Desert, where much of this book was written. The stone-lined footpath at Siberia is real. Please be careful not to disturb the stones if you go looking for it. So a lot of the places, if they're along Route 66 or the railroad, they're probably real names. If they're out there in the deep desert, I probably made them up. I sometimes refer to biology as though it were not simply a branch of natural science, but almost some entity or quality of our nature. In fact, I'm using this word as a label to describe our innate drives and motivations, particularly those which are a result of our genetics. I use biology where others might use the word instinct, though my meaning is intended to be more comprehensive and reflective not only of the qualities of our being, which are the result of our DNA programming, including epigenetics, but also the possibility of more comprehensive programming by our society, upbringing, and times. There's some biology in the behavior of an ant colony, which can't quite be nailed down to any particular genes within the individual ants. It's this emergent quality of groups and society which is somehow rooted in what we are, yet nevertheless transcends the individual. This is what I mean by biology. The sum natural qualities of what we are at the level of the cell, organism, family, community, and civilization. This is probably as close as I'll get in this book to anything mystical or spiritual, though I'm confident even the mystery of the programming of groups will one day give way to the inquiry of science. So when I use that word biology, and I put it in uppercase here, I'm referring to to the big package of instinct and motivation. That's a loud car. That whole package of what we are, that motivates us from birth to death, that that gets us to try to make more of ourselves and raise our children successfully, and sit back and watch them in our daughterage and say, oh, our grandchildren are on their way, and then we can die a happy life because our biology motivated us to do this. If it didn't do that, we wouldn't be here. It's also biology. The term biology cycles back into play when I get to the chapter called The Good Life, because the principle of purpose identifies two purpose. First is biology, which is getting our genes into the next generation, surviving as long as we can, reproducing, and making sure that our young are as viable as it can be before we die and get the heck out of the way. And then the second purpose is living a virtuous life. That one is not part of the biology. That's just something I wanted to do. Next chapter. Paragraph. My only regular companion in the desert is my 2004 BMW R1150 GS motorcycle, which both delivered me to and from the desert and kept me entertained with pleasant distraction when the deep void of nature triggered a response of panic or despair, and I ran. The desert is the perfect environment for this type of bike, which is branded a dual sport adventure tour, capable of both street and light off-road riding. Though I never rode it far off-road, preferring my 2 feet for such travel. Though I never rode it far off-road, preferring my feet for such travel, the bike was nevertheless ready for any dirt road or double track I chose to follow, and I couldn't imagine these adventures with anything else. What follows is a list of items I carry with me or on the bike to facilitate my desert adventures. And what follows is a long laundry list, 2.25 pages long, of everything I take with me in the desert, on the bike, in my pack, on my person. So I won't read that whole list. You can go to the website, goingalone. It's actually 3.25 pages. You can go to the website, goingalone.org, and see the list if you're curious. 1, 2, 3, and a little bit up here. So I'm almost done. That's the end of the chapter. We're almost done. What time is it? 7:16. Wow, has it been 45 minutes already? So here we go. Welcome to my book on the result of my life's effort of fulfilling the suggestion and challenge offered by Thoreau and Walden. This book is my own answer and homage to that great author's masterpiece of expression of the bold experiment he made of his life and the example he has become to so many. In 1998, I visited Thoreau's grave at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Concord, Massachusetts. While there, I left a small pebble atop his resting place, as had so many others before me, as simple homage to a man and his creative effort, which has meant so much to me and has helped me to be stronger and more courageous in my desire to, and I'm quoting here from Thoreau, live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Now, I leave a somewhat larger pebble to Thoreau in the form of this book, a simple gesture of appreciation for the life of courage, joy, and independence, which I have found by way of his example. And that is the end of the chapter introduction. After that comes the cast, which I'll read next time. Thank you for joining me. Oh, don't worry, if you have a question, I'll stick on just saying thanks for joining us. We read that first chapter. We made it through that whole thing. And Kyoja says, hello, Kurt. Hello, you're waving at me. Well, thank you for joining me, everybody, for this reading of the introduction chapter to Going Alone. If you have any question, let me know right now. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off in just a moment. Head back over to my house across the street. I'll see if my family's ready to rouse themselves from sleep. And my wife and I are going to go see a movie today and go have a nice lunch together. Emily, of course, is welcome to join us, but I don't think she is. I think today is the 5th month anniversary of her time with her boyfriend, and you know how those 5-month anniversaries are. So I think they'll be spending it together. So I wish you all well. Have a great day, and remember, be safe, but not too safe.